The sound of her laughter hit me from the hallway. Not the forced, polite laugh she gives during dinner with my mother. Not the tired one she uses when I make a bad pun to lighten the mood after another cold evening. This laugh was raw, free, like it belonged to a version of her I hadn't seen in years, maybe never. And it wasn't for me. I was standing by the half-open laundry room door, holding a pair of my socks she'd tossed behind the washing machine last week. She'd said they vanished. I should have knocked. I should have said something, but I didn't. I stood there, silent, heart thudding against the basket like it wanted out more than I did. Inside the room, her voice came through, low and playful. "You better not call tonight. He's been weird lately. I think he suspects." A muffled male chuckle followed. "Tell him to stay in his lane. He's just a roommate with a ring." They both laughed again. I stepped back. My heel hit the broom, sent it clattering across the floor. Their voices stopped. I bolted to the kitchen before they noticed. She walked in 2 minutes later, cheeks flushed, phone in hand. She didn't even ask if I heard anything. That told me everything I needed to know. She opened the fridge, pulled out oat milk, and poured herself a glass like nothing happened. I stared at her. She avoided eye contact like I was just another wall in the house she hadn't painted yet. We said nothing over dinner. Couldn't eat. She did, slowly, like she had all the time in the world. That night, I lay in bed awake, eyes glued to the ceiling, feeling the weight of words I couldn't say. She came in late, hair freshly brushed, wearing the oversized gray tee she always puts on when she doesn't want to be touched. I reached out hesitantly, not to hold her, just to feel if there was anything left between us. She flinched, and then she whispered it. "Don't touch me tonight." Just like that. No emotion, no hesitation. I turned away from her voice, and for the first time in our marriage, I finally listened. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't even move. But I knew something had shifted. Not in her, in me. And in that moment, something inside whispered back, "Then you'll never touch me again." At sunrise, I would leave. Not just the bed, not just the house, but the man I had been for her. Loyal, timid, endlessly forgiving. But before I left, there was one thing I had to do. Something that would force her to see the truth without saying a word. And it started with a note, and the return of something she thought was lost forever. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there beside her, watching the soft rise and fall of her back as the digital clock ticked toward dawn. Her breathing was calm, peaceful, like she hadn't just carved me open with 5 careless words. "Don't touch me tonight." It wasn't rejection. It was dismissal, an eraser. The silence in that room felt manufactured, too clean, too practiced. That's when it hit me. This wasn't the first time she'd said that. It was just the first time I'd listened. By 5 a.m., the sky outside was a deep charcoal gray. I moved quietly. No ceremony. No slamming drawers or angry gestures. Just quiet, bitter efficiency. I took my duffel bag from the top of the closet, stuffed it with clothes, and zipped it halfway before I noticed something tucked in the back corner behind her row of forgotten heels and a dusty box labeled "Old Scarves." A black velvet jewelry box. Not new, not pristine. The edges were worn, frayed slightly at the corners. I didn't want to open it. I really didn't. But something told me that leaving without knowing everything would haunt me worse than any confrontation. I clicked it open. Inside was a silver necklace I'd never seen before. A small, delicate pendant in the shape of a crescent moon. Definitely not her style. I know that sounds petty, but I knew Cambria. She wore sharp lines, minimalist, modern pieces. This was soft, romantic, almost personal. And then I saw the receipt. Not for the necklace, for a hotel room, the Bloom Inn, not even 15 minutes away from our house. Booked 2 weeks ago under a name I didn't recognize, S. Madsen. The stay was for 2 guests with breakfast included and late checkout. That's when my hands started shaking. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Just shattered. Like all the pieces of my reality had come loose and I couldn't figure out where they were supposed to go anymore. She'd been sleeping beside me while planning weekend getaways with someone who signed their name like a stranger in a crime novel. I took a picture of everything. The necklace, the receipt, even the box's serial tag in case I needed it later. Evidence, not for revenge, but for truth. Because I knew if I confronted her directly, she'd lie. She was too good at that. She'd perfected it over months. I left the box where I found it. I finished packing. Left a folded note on the kitchen counter. Just 6 words. You made your choice. I'm gone. I slipped out the door before the sun rose. No keys left. No dramatic last words. I didn't even take Bear, our dog. He'd been sleeping in her room for weeks. I couldn't stomach the idea of dragging him into this mess. I figured I'd come back for him later, once she realized I wasn't just sulking in the basement or hiding in the garage like the spineless man she probably thought I was. I drove to a motel on the edge of town. Not the Bloom Inn. That place made my skin crawl now. Mine had no charm. Just a cheap key card, weak coffee, and peeling wallpaper. But it was mine. And for the first time in what felt like years, I was alone without pretending I was fine. But here's where it gets worse. That afternoon, I went back to grab some files from the garage that I needed for work. She wasn't supposed to be home. Her schedule was always the same, but her car was in the driveway, and so was a black Jeep I didn't recognize. Windows tinted, engine off, parked too confidently in my space. I didn't go through the front door. Instead, I walked around the side of the house, slipped into the garage through the keypad, and grabbed the box of documents. That's when I heard it. Muffled voices from inside. Not the TV, not a phone call. 2 people laughing, then silence, then a thud, and then the unmistakable sound of our bedroom door closing. I didn't go in. I didn't need to. I left through the back door as quietly as I came. I set the box down by the edge of the driveway, pulled out my phone, and took one picture. The Jeep's license plate. Because as much as it hurt, I wanted to know exactly who she was opening our home to, and who she'd been whispering to long before she stopped whispering to me. I didn't sleep in that motel room either. I lay on the hard mattress with my phone balanced on my chest. The glow from the screen the only light in the room. I couldn't stop staring at the photo of the license plate. I zoomed in again and again, as if something new would appear if I just looked long enough, as if the truth would soften, but it didn't. I ran the plate through a contact I still had at the DMV, a guy named Denny I helped with a cybersecurity audit a year back. He owed me a favor. I texted him the plate. 15 minutes later, he sent back a name. Sawyer Madsen. I froze. I knew that name. Not from her phone, not from her past, but from mine. Sawyer was one of the 5 people I'd invited to our wedding. Not a close friend, no, more like a work buddy I'd bonded with over late-night deadlines and horrible gas station coffee. He wasn't in any photos because he left before the cake was cut. But he'd been there. He met Cambria, shook my hand, told me I was a lucky man. I remember thinking he seemed like the kind of guy who couldn't hold on to anything serious. Always moving from job to job, woman to woman. A charming, fast-talking, free agent who could sell thunder to a storm cloud. Apparently, he hadn't changed. I scrolled through my old emails and found one from 3 years ago. Subject line, Sawyer moving to town. Can I give him your number? It was from Cambria. I never replied, didn't think I needed to, but now I realized I had unknowingly given him a pass. A path right back into our lives. I sat there with my fists clenched and heart cracking in my chest. She didn't just cheat with some faceless guy. She picked someone I once trusted. Someone who stood 5 feet from me on the happiest day of my life. I didn't confront her that night. Couldn't. I needed more. Needed everything. So, I did something I never thought I would. I broke my own rule. I went back home the next day while she was at work, using the spare key hidden under the loose brick in the backyard. The one she didn't know I knew about. I wasn't there to break anything or scream. I was there for the truth. Her laptop was open on the kitchen counter. No password. She probably assumed I'd never dare touch it. She was right until now. I opened her browser. First tab, cute romantic cabins near Asheville. Second tab, gifts for men who have everything. I clicked through her messages. There were dozens between her and Sawyer, but one in particular made my stomach twist. Cambria. He's so clueless. I actually feel bad sometimes. Sawyer. Don't. He doesn't make you laugh like I do. He just exists. Cambria. You're right. I don't even flinch when I lie to him anymore. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I felt erased. Like my years of loyalty and patience had been rewritten in a matter of paragraphs. But the most gutting part wasn't what she said about me. It was what she said about them. Cambria. Let's do it. Book the cabin. I'll tell him I'm going on a girls' retreat again. Sawyer. 3rd time's the charm. Smirking face, they were planning a third getaway. I copied everything. Emails, messages, the receipts, screenshots. I sent it all to myself, then deleted the history like I'd never been there. The worst part? I recognized the name on the cabin rental invoice. It was under my wife's maiden name. She'd already started becoming someone else. I was halfway out the door when I saw it. A single photo tucked under the couch cushion. One of those old Polaroids we used to take before smartphones swallowed our memories. It was of us, me and Cambria, sitting in our first apartment eating ramen on milk crates. Her in an oversized hoodie, me barefoot holding chopsticks wrong. She'd written on the bottom in messy black Sharpie, "Our beginning. Don't let me forget." I stared at it. She had forgotten. Or maybe she chose to, but I hadn't. And if she thought she was going to walk away from all of this like it never happened, she was wrong. Because I had one more move left. And it would begin with a reservation. Not for a cabin, but for dinner somewhere public, somewhere she wouldn't expect what I had in store. I reserved a table under a fake name. It wasn't a 5-star spot. Nothing dramatic, just an Italian place Cambria always claimed was too sentimental. That's exactly why I chose it. It was small, quiet, the kind of place where people sat close and whispered secrets over candlelight. I'd made the reservation for 7:30, told her I wanted to talk, sent a calm message with a time and address, and ended it with, "No pressure, but I'll be there." She replied, "Sounds serious. Are you okay?" I didn't answer. Let her wonder. She needed to feel that weight, even for a moment. When I got to the restaurant, I made sure to arrive early. I sat at a table near the back wall, one that gave me a full view of the door. My hands trembled against the wine glass as I waited, stomach in knots, rehearsing what I'd say. But no speech came, no grand plan. I just kept thinking about how many lies she'd fed me, how long I'd let her do it because I thought protecting the relationship meant sacrificing myself. At 7:41, she walked in. Cambria wore the emerald green dress she hadn't worn in over a year. The one I used to tell her brought out the gold in her eyes. Her makeup was soft. Her hair curled just enough to look accidental. She looked exactly like the version of her I remembered from the good years. Only this time I saw the performance. She scanned the restaurant, spotted me, and walked over like she wasn't nervous. But I saw it. The tightness in her smile, the way her fingers clutched her phone in her purse. "Ellis," she said, sitting down slowly. "You look like you haven't slept." She wasn't wrong. I leaned in. "You remember this place?" She looked around vaguely. "Didn't we come here when we signed our first lease?" "Yeah," I said, smiling with just my mouth. "We sat by the window. You spilled red wine on your blouse and blamed the waiter." She laughed. "God, I forgot about that." "No, you didn't." I looked her straight in the eye. "You just replaced it with something else." The waiter came and asked if we were waiting on a third guest. Cambria glanced at me. I said, "No, not yet. We ordered." She asked why I wanted to meet. Said things felt off lately. Tried to play the concerned wife card. She leaned in like she was genuinely worried. But her performance cracked the moment I slid my phone across the table. "Press play," I said. She hesitated. Then she did. The screen lit up with the messages I'd found. Her own words, her own emojis, her own cruelty. Her face didn't twitch, not once. She simply locked the phone and handed it back like it was a sales report she'd already reviewed. "I guess you've been busy," she said softly. "That's it?" I asked, stunned. "What do you want me to say, Ellis?" Her voice dropped. "That I'm sorry? That it meant nothing? Because I'm not, and it didn't." I sat back, air drained from my lungs. Her words didn't stab. They dissolved something, like acid on the last threads of denial I'd been clinging to. "I wanted a chance to talk like adults," I said. "To give you space to say something true for once." She leaned forward. "You want the truth?" I started seeing Sawyer again because he made me feel real. "You always walked on eggshells. You never challenged me. You just stayed. Even when I stopped loving you." I swallowed hard. "You could have just left." "I thought you'd break," she said. Honestly, I didn't think you'd notice. That hit harder than anything she'd said so far. Not that she cheated, not that she fell out of love, but that she thought I was too small to notice. But that's when I smiled. Because I had noticed, and she was about to learn just how much. "Funny," I said. Sawyer didn't think I'd notice either. Her eyes narrowed. What? I gestured toward the entrance. Right on cue, Sawyer walked in, casual, smirking. Not a care in the world until he saw us. He froze like a deer in headlights. Cambria turned to me, fury blooming across her face. You invited him? I shrugged. Didn't need to. I just had to leave my car out front. She turned back to Sawyer, who now looked pale and unsure. I watched it all unfold. The way she glared. The way he faltered. Two people whose power only existed in the shadows. I stood, grabbed my coat, dropped my key on the table, house keys, garage fob, even the little brass key to the safe we once used for vacation cash. I'm not doing this in the dark anymore, I said. Whatever you two are, you can be it. Just don't call it love. As I walked out, I heard Sawyer whisper, "What did you tell him?" And Cambria replied, "Too little, too late." I didn't look back. I didn't need to because for the first time in years I wasn't the one standing still. 3 days passed. Not a word, not a text, not an email. Cambria went radio silent after that night at the restaurant, and part of me hoped that was the end. I moved into a short-term rental above a bakery. The place smelled like cinnamon in the morning and burnt dough by noon, but it was mine. No ghost of her perfume lingering in the hall. No uneven silence humming between the walls. I tried to settle. I really did. I bought a second-hand desk, set up my monitor. I even took Bear, our dog, back from her place, or rather, met her on neutral ground to get him. She didn't speak then either. Just handed me the leash, gave Bear a pat on the head, and walked away like she was returning borrowed furniture. I thought I was finally done with her until the knock came. It was late, just after 9 p.m. I had just turned on the kettle when I heard it. 3 short knocks, hesitant, familiar. My stomach sank before I even opened the door. Cambria stood in the hallway in an oversized gray hoodie. Not mine. No makeup, hair tied back like she hadn't slept. I didn't say a word, just stepped aside. She walked in slowly, scanning the apartment like she expected to see someone else. She sat on the edge of the couch without asking, arms crossed, like the world had wronged her. "I need to ask you something," she said after a long pause. "Then ask," I replied, still standing. She looked at the floor. "Do you still have the documents from our joint storage unit?" I blinked. "Seriously?" She looked up, tense. "There's something I need in there. Personal. It's important." I didn't respond. I just waited. Then she said something I wasn't ready for. "It's about the child support papers." My chest tightened. "What child support?" She hesitated. And then, with the softest voice I've ever heard from her, she said, "Sawyer has a daughter. She's 2. He didn't tell me until last week." I sat down slowly, still not processing it. "Why would that matter to you?" Her lips parted. She paused too long. "Because he thinks it might not be his." The air drained from the room. I laughed, not out of amusement, but disbelief. "You're saying you might be pregnant?" "No," she said quickly. This was from before. One of the weekends at the cabin. I had a pregnancy scare, then told him it was a false alarm, but now his ex is demanding a paternity test and he says it could be mine. He wants me to help him deny it. "You're not making any sense," I muttered. "I'm telling you because I need you to confirm that you and I weren't intimate during that time." I stood up. "You came here to ask me to clear your name for a kid that might not even be his and definitely isn't mine?" She looked up with eyes like a cornered animal. "I'm trying to protect what's left of my life." I walked over to the door and opened it. "You came here to use me again." "No, Ellis. I came here because you're the only one who won't twist this." I stared at her, my jaw clenched. "You already twisted everything." She stood slowly, pulled a folded piece of paper from her hoodie pocket, and placed it on the table. "If you ever talk to a lawyer, this says I waive any right to the house. It's yours." I didn't reach for it. I didn't thank her. "Why now?" I asked. She looked at me one last time, that same strange stillness in her face I'd seen the night she whispered not to touch her. "Because Sawyer's planning to run. He said he's done with the mess. And I think he's taking my bank account with him." She left without another word. The door clicked shut behind her. I sat there in that still, cinnamon-scented room for a long time, watching the folded paper on the table like it might catch fire on its own. This wasn't closure. It was a storm unraveling. And somehow, I'd been in its center the whole time, thinking I was the one being blown away. But no, they were both running now. And I was just getting started. I didn't touch the paper she left. Not for days. I just left it on the table like a cursed artifact, daring it to mean something. And when I finally unfolded it, her handwritten signature at the bottom, all tidy and slanted like she used to write birthday cards, it wasn't freedom. It was confirmation. Confirmation that her exit strategy had collapsed, and I was just one stop along the wreckage. But something kept gnawing at me. It wasn't the house or the lies or even the insult of her showing up, begging me to pretend we were celibate when she was sneaking off to cabins and pretending they were yoga retreats. It was the way she said Sawyer was planning to run. Like she hadn't expected it. Like she thought he loved her. And that's what finally pushed me to do something I'd sworn I wouldn't. I called his ex. Her name was Willa, a name I hadn't heard in years. She and Sawyer had been a disaster from the start. They met in Vegas, married on impulse, and divorced 8 months later after a broken rib, 2 police reports, and 1 restraining order that was mysteriously dropped. The kind of woman who'd make a bonfire out of her wedding photos and then invite friends over to roast marshmallows over it. She picked up on the second ring. Ellis. My name out of her mouth felt strange. Familiar in the way stepping into your childhood bedroom feels familiar after 20 years. I need to ask you something, I said. She cut me off. Let me guess. Sawyer's in trouble again. I exhaled. Worse than you think. In 10 minutes, she told me more than I'd learned in months. Turns out, Sawyer never really let go of Willa. Not emotionally, not financially. He had a pattern. Charm a woman into trusting him. Talk about escaping to the woods or the beach or some future that never came, and then slowly bleed her dry while promising he was on the verge of getting things right. He used aliases, took out credit in other people's names. And Willa? She'd never filed charges because, and here's the part that turned my blood cold, he had something on her. I asked her what that meant. She hesitated. He records things, she said flatly. Conversations, photos, some of them private. He saves everything, even stuff from years ago. He uses it when people try to expose him. That's when everything clicked. That was his power over Cambria. It wasn't just emotional. It was tactical, strategic. He had turned her into his puppet, not because he loved her, but because she was easy to control once she crossed the line. He knew about me, about our finances, about the way I never fought back. And I suddenly understood. I wasn't the loser husband she lied to. I was the cover, the excuse, the insurance policy, the safe, naive place she could retreat to while things with Sawyer spiraled again. But that wasn't the part that broke me. It was when Willa asked, "You ever hear of that place in Vermont? The rental cabin they go to?" I went still. "Yes. That cabin's in my name," she said. Sawyer had asked her to co-sign for it 2 years ago. Said he needed a place to disconnect while he sorted out custody issues with another woman. She did it back when she still believed his apologies. "And guess what?" she said. "There's a camera there outside, facing the entrance. He installed it without telling me, but I got an alert a few months back when it picked up movement. Want to guess whose face walked past it?" I didn't speak. My throat was dry. "Cambria," she said. "Twice." Willa was quiet for a long moment. Then she sighed. "If you want the footage, I'll send it. I'm tired of him winning." When the video arrived in my inbox an hour later, I couldn't bring myself to watch it at first. I just stared at the thumbnail. Cambria walking up the steps in a long red coat I'd never seen before. Smiling, laughing, turning to someone just out of frame. When I finally hit play, I didn't focus on her expression or Sawyer's shadow behind her. I focused on the date and time in the bottom corner. That was the weekend of my father's funeral. I had gone alone because Cambria said it would be too emotionally overwhelming for her to attend. Said she didn't want to be a distraction. I buried my father while she played house with a con man in a borrowed cabin under another woman's name. That was the moment the pain turned into something else. Not revenge, not anger. Clarity. I no longer wanted her to hurt. I didn't even want her to understand what she'd done. I wanted her to watch it all fall apart. And I knew exactly how to make that happen. You don't announce the end of a performance while the actors are still bowing. You let the curtain fall, then cut the lights. That was my mindset in the days that followed the video. I didn't tell anyone what I'd learned. Not Cambria, not Sawyer, not even my sister, who had been begging me to lawyer up since the first signs of betrayal. I didn't want confrontation. I wanted exposure. Slow, cold, irreversible. So I made a plan. First, I sent a package anonymously to Cambria's HR department. Inside, a neatly organized envelope containing images of her and Sawyer at the Vermont cabin on the weekend of my father's funeral, paired with her messages joking about borrowing PTO to sin responsibly. I didn't need to accuse her of anything. Her words, her timestamps, and her behavior filled in the blanks. Second, I filed a quiet complaint to the financial oversight board that monitored Sawyer's newest consulting firm. He'd registered the LLC using someone else's address, Willa's, and the company had been funneling cash from at least 3 other women, based on deposit logs Willa had tracked in a moment of fury. But the third step, that one was the most delicate. Cambria's birthday was coming up, and her best friend Clara was planning a small surprise party at a swanky rooftop bar downtown. How did I know? Because Clara and I had once been close, before Cambria poisoned every friendship that didn't center her. Clara and I still followed each other on Instagram, and when she posted a blurry boomerang of gift bags with "C's Big Night" in sparkly gold, I knew that was my window. I RSVP'd. She didn't know I was coming. Neither did Cambria. I wore a navy shirt she had once complimented, back when compliments still existed in our marriage. I didn't come with anyone, didn't bring a gift, just my phone and a little drive loaded with the files that had turned my heartbreak into a case study. The bar was dimly lit, laughter and music rising like steam from every corner. Cambria was near the bar, drink in hand, surrounded by people who knew just the surface version of her. Charming, elegant, complicated in a mysterious way. When she saw me, her expression didn't crack. Not at first, but I watched her eyes flick past me toward the exit, already calculating if she could run. I didn't approach her. I approached Clara, smiled, hugged her, made small talk, waited until Cambria was looking right at us, and then I handed Clara the drive and said, "Can you do me a favor and play this video on the screen when the slideshow ends?" She blinked. "What is it?" "Her highlight reel," I said with a quiet smile. Minutes later, while everyone clinked glasses and the background music faded, the venue's projector lit up with a slideshow Cambria had no doubt curated herself. Childhood photos, college memories, blurry Polaroids of beach days and brunches. Then came the cabin footage. First, no one reacted. It looked like just a woman walking up steps in a red coat. But then the timestamp rolled in. The texts flashed on screen. Her laughter played from a saved voicemail, the same one she sent Sawyer with the message, "I can't stop thinking about your hands." Cambria's smile vanished. She turned to Clara, furious. But Clara had already stepped back, covering her mouth in shock. One guest muttered, "Wait, is that recent?" Another whispered, "Wasn't that when her husband's dad died?" Cambria turned to me, her face pale now. She opened her mouth, but I beat her to it. "Don't worry," I said. "This wasn't revenge. This was just honesty. The thing you always said you wanted." She slapped the drink out of my hand. It shattered. The room fell into a silence so thick it smothered the music. I looked down at the shards of glass and citrus soaking into the carpet, then back at her. She was shaking now, not from sadness, from exposure. Because Cambria wasn't afraid of what she'd done. She was afraid of what it looked like now that everyone else could see it. I left before security could be called, before her excuses could reach full speed. I didn't need to hear them. Sawyer wasn't there. In fact, I later learned he'd already left the city 2 days earlier, taking with him the contents of Cambria's joint account and a storage unit she thought he was leasing for them in case they moved in together. He disappeared, and she was left holding nothing but broken glass, public silence, and a reputation that would never fully recover. The best part? I never raised my voice, never broke a law, never sent a threat. I just held up a mirror and let her fall in love with the reflection one last time before it shattered. It's been 11 weeks since that night on the rooftop. 11 weeks since the footage rolled, since the crowd fell silent, since Cambria's carefully woven image unraveled like the hem of a cheap dress in a thunderstorm. I didn't stay to see the aftermath, but word travels. Her job put her on indefinite leave. The landlord of our old house, yes, our, because I never officially removed her name, filed a complaint after she stopped making payments. I could have stepped in. I didn't. Instead, I started over. Not with bitterness, not with some dramatic reset button, just slow, small steps. I kept the apartment above the bakery, renewed the lease for another year. The landlord knocked on my door one morning and handed me a tray of fresh scones with a note that said, "You're not invisible, Ellis. We see you trying." I cried for the first time in months reading that. Not because of the gesture, but because I believed it. I took Bear on longer walks. Real ones. Not the quick 5-minute do-your-business rounds I used to rush through when life felt too loud. We walked along the Riverside Trail, down unfamiliar streets, through parks I never noticed when I was too busy figuring out how to save a marriage that didn't want to be saved. I started therapy weekly. My therapist, a woman named Jill with silver hair and a voice that sounded like a violin string, never judged me when I said, "I still feel like I failed, even though I was the one left behind." She smiled and replied, "No, Ellis, you didn't fail. You just stopped carrying someone else's mess." I wrote again. Not revenge letters, not angry drafts I'd never send. Just little thoughts, observations, one-liners I used to jot down in the margins of receipts and napkins when I was younger, before everything I wrote turned into survival instructions. One night, at the cafe below my apartment, I met someone. Her name's Marley. She's not flashy, not the type who commands a room. She asked if she could share my table because the place was packed. I said yes. She asked what I was writing, and I told her, thoughts I was afraid to think out loud. She nodded like she understood exactly what that meant. We didn't fall into each other's arms. There was no cinematic kiss in the rain, but we talked for 3 hours that night about everything from fear to childhood cereal preferences. And when she left, she didn't ask for my number. She came back the next night instead. And the next. I told her the truth. Not all of it. Just enough. Enough to know I wasn't broken, just rebuilding. One Sunday morning, while we sat drinking burnt coffee and watching Bear chase a pigeon in erratic circles, she said, "You seem peaceful, like someone who finally put down the weight they were never meant to carry." I smiled because Cambria still hasn't reached out. Maybe she never will. And for once, I'm okay with that, because I finally realized something that took me far too long to learn. She didn't ruin me. She revealed me. Revealed what I'd been suppressing, what I'd been surviving, what I'd become by shrinking myself down to fit her version of love. Now, I'm no longer waiting to be loved in return. I'm just living, honestly, quietly, fully. And when people ask what happened to my marriage, I just say, "She whispered not to touch her." And for the first time, I listened.